Yeah, I think I listened to Governor Bullock a few times talk about the value of public service, and I think he's spot on. I suspect that, Governor, what motivates all of us is a little bit different, but in the end, the same, a willingness to serve. For me, my family, my great-grandparents, my great-grandfather was in the state senate. My grandfather was a governor and a U.S. senator, and my mom ran for governor unsuccessfully. And when I was in, junior high and elementary school, it wasn't so much I wanted to get in politics, because that wasn't the discussion as much as, we have got good fortune living in Wyoming and in this country. And it's not by accident that this place provides so much. It's by people serving their communities and their state, their country. And it doesn't have to be by politics, but there is a great obligation for all of us to give back in some fashion. For me, when I got out of high school, I guess if you said the one thing I knew I wouldn't do was get into politics. But life changes and opportunities present themselves. And when the opportunity to run for governor came up, I thought that would be perhaps a way I could serve and do my best to serve the state of Wyoming. And you reach for me, the end of the 8 years, and you reflect back, and there's things you wish you would have done better and things you've done differently, but it is the greatest of privileges to be able to serve a place that you love. So that's my backstory on how I got into it, and the reward for having the opportunity for 8 years to be part of something that hopefully helped out a place that I love so much.
Yeah, and I think part of that is we all have certain skills, and we should give to the extent that we can. Like, my wife wouldn't have chosen necessarily this life, but her dad would line all 6 kids up every morning and go out and say, be a servant today. And be a servant means so many different things. Like, I wasn't raised in a political family, but in part, the place-based, like, Montana was a gift for me growing up. And part of it was, I think, not selfishly, but I wanted to make sure that my kids had that same gift. Those same opportunities, be that outdoors or economically or others. So I ended up starting working for a government agency as a lawyer. I loved it, for the Montana Department of Justice, but worked in the private practice as well. But at the end of the day, thought that, you're not going to get rich, you're not going to get famous, but the rewards of getting to do what we got to do for that moment in time.
Yeah.
It's not like every single day you'd get the attaboys, but you positively impacted your state and people in it, people that we may never meet, but made a difference in their lives. And it's a life well worth living, I think.
Governor, when you were young, you ran into, I'm sure as I did, in the small towns and the coffee shops and the post office and your sporting events, the ranchers and the farmers and the railroad people, all who you grew to appreciate from their hard work, and they cared about as much for the communities and state. And so they may have not said to you or to me, hey, you need to get in politics, but they reinforced this message that, we all have an obligation to make the place a little better.
That's right. And those ranchers and everyone else are making it. We're making it better. We all just figure out the different ways we might be able to serve.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things I thought about often is, for the nurse and the school teacher and the rancher, am I doing the right thing by them? Because they show up at work every day, right? They don't get credit for what they do, but if you can make their condition and their opportunities better, that's a good thing.
And that was actually, like, through my campaigns, one of the things that I'd often say is, there was one of my teachers, Mrs. Connors, and Mrs. Connors would give $25 every 6 months. And for Miss Connors, she's a retired teacher, that was a lot of money.
Yeah.
Like, I'd say to my campaign staff, let's never do anything that would disappoint Mrs. Connors.
It's a great way to think about it. My great-grandfather had a motto, and of course he was a rancher, and it was a theme that I picked up on, that I think he meant mostly in the ranching world, but was something that meant something greater to me, which is in Wyoming, where you find one blade of grass, leave two, which was the message, leave it better than you found it.
Yeah.
Governor, what would you say to how do you get more young people to be interested in politics?
Look, the uphill investment in some respects, right? And like I would always say, if 18 to 35 voted at the same level, 65 up, they decide every single election. And they have a lot more at stake than we do. Now, I look at, in some issues, from addressing climate to some of the gun safety and things, it is that next generation that we're learning from, that's sort of leading us in some respects. And I think one of the challenges is always like, look, this could be, I wouldn't have done it my career otherwise, and I'm glad that I did it. I think at times with young folks, there can be this frustration that, oh, things don't happen quickly enough, or, oh, that he's not 100% ideologically pure, or yet how we got things done was by saying, no, some things take time. So to be patient enough, but also know that any investment that you give into this, you get more out of than, I mean, I got more out of getting to serve than anything that was ever given to me.
I think, I guess, I don't know if it's right, but I sort of use my own kids as an example of what's their interest in politics. And I try to judge, they were fairly young when I got in, is did I advance that or lessen it? And I think both my kids now would say they're not going to get into politics, subject to change, obviously, but we'll see. But I think the answer, how do you get more young people in politics? Part of it is, how do we do better in politics?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're a young person, you're picking up the paper, and so-and-so is running for president, and they're going after the president's, the campaign of the president, his kids, his nephews, they have to say, why? Why would I put myself through that, and why would I put my family through that? It's gotten so brutal. And then on top of being brutal, can you affect change?
Yeah.
And I think that's, we have to do better in terms of, it's always going to be difficult, politics, but it shouldn't be so difficult and so nasty that it tears up yourself and, more importantly, your family.
Your family, for sure.
And I know you worried about that, and I worried about that. When the kids open the paper, what are they thinking? And when they go to elementary school and junior high and college, how does it affect them? And it's gotten so difficult now. I think that's part of the challenge.
Yeah.
But today you and I got to meet with the delegates of Western Governors Foundation. They're so incredibly bright and smart. And I think if we can encourage people like them to get into politics, we'll be okay.
Yeah, and hopefully both clean up some of the mistakes collectively our generation has made. But I think you're also right that one of the ways to encourage people is model the behavior that
exactly
they ought to have. Because that's how I learned. That's how you learned from your grandfather and the folks that I saw growing up in elected office. Like, there was a base decency, which we should all expect.
Do you find, my kids also seem much, as people our age get wrapped around the axle about particularly some of these social issues, my kids in some ways are much more open-minded. I mean, about a lot of things, and I've learned from them in a number of ways.
Oh, for sure.
Because, they have different friends and different interests, and sometimes you'd be meeting with a legislator or something, and we're all wrapped up around this, and you talk to your kids and like, what?
What's the big deal?
What are you doing? Don't you have some roads to build?
No, that's right.
So
that's exactly right.
So they teach us even now.
Yeah. In the West, we do have some shared issues, right? That land and natural resources and water, and look, fire doesn't know boundaries. Fire and challenges. Forestry doesn't know boundaries. So much of our lives are intertwined with the federal, either because of land ownership or regulation, that we begin with a base of even if different philosophies and ideologies, but a base of sort of shared interests. Now, I think one thing that expanding that beyond, and it sounds sort of self-serving, but governors actually have to get stuff done, right? That you're closer to the people. You'll run into your supporters and your detractors, be it if you go to Target or anywhere else. And there's an expectation that it's more than just a speech, you're actually getting stuff done. So hopefully the lesson is, and that's not sound obnoxious, but I think that Washington could learn a lot more from Wyoming than Wyoming could ever learn from Washington.
I completely agree with that. I mean, you go on Sunday morning to get eggs to cook up, you know, inevitably you're going to find somebody that wants to provide their view on something, which I think, you know, and partly it's we're a small state. I think that's really healthy, right? you get to hear that firsthand. But I completely agree with you. You know, in Congress, the Republicans, it's the Democrats. Democrats, it's the Republicans. It's whatever.
Yeah.
There's all this, so many people in this finger point. In your state and in my state, that road's either not getting repaired or it is.
That's right.
And you can't say, well, it's the this or it's the that. You have to accept the responsibility.
Yeah.
And I'd also say, in addition to that, I think one of the reasons that the Western Governors Association is unique in terms of bipartisanship is the design of it is you and I get to spend time together. I get to know you, your spouse, your kids, and whatever we agree or disagree on. I know, for example, if you had been president of the United States, I'd have been completely happy with it, even if I would have disagreed with them, because I knew you would have the best interest of the country at heart. And that is a result of you and I getting to know each other. That's a result of me knowing, hey, we'll agree or disagree on any issue, but I know anytime Governor Bullock attacks an issue, he's doing it from a standpoint of how to help out. And, you know, as a collateral benefit of that, we leave our time in office and we still have these lifelong friendships.
That's right.
Which is really cool.
Yeah.
And the other thing I'd add is, and you experience this too, I think, the nature of campaigns. You know, I got asked to go campaign against you. And I would say it's an unwritten rule in WGA, you don't campaign against the people in WGA, even if they're part of the other party. And it's an unwritten rule not just because it's unseemly, it's because I get to see the work you're doing, and I know you're a good governor. And it would be completely insincere to go into your state and say, oh, Governor Bullock's not good. It would be, in addition to that, I think a breach of the friendship and trust that we get to develop at WGA.
And I hope that rule continues to exist because it is one that it makes a difference. And I mean, you can look at Montana and Wyoming being neighbors, about coal, about sage grouse, about endangered species.
Yellowstone.
There were times that I'd call and say, Governor Mead, will you come up to Montana and do this? And look, like, we don't agree on all of the issues, but at the core, there's enough there that, like, what a gift to have that, because some folks would turn around and say, all right, I don't believe in Bullock, but if Mead is saying something, and I think the trust and the friendship and the commonality of interests, I know it made me a better governor.
And you know, the other thing is I think about, this political world is so artificial because love my spouse, 30 plus years, we don't agree every day, right? I don't agree with my friends every day.
Yeah.
But just because I don't agree with them doesn't mean I dislike them or don't love them. But in politics, somehow we've come to this point, if you and I disagree, we have to dislike.
That's exactly
which
right.
is a crazy world. But I think WGA, we don't see that. We understand we're going to agree or disagree, but we can form these incredible friendships that are based upon trust and understanding we're all trying to do the right thing by our states.
I think that's right.
Well, you brought this up a little bit today in the earlier forum about this country 250 plus, where we've been, where we are now. And Obviously the Civil War was the ultimate test, but we've certainly faced tests since then. But I think for me, the most recent test, and frankly the scariest, was January 6th, when there was the riot on the Capitol. And it was scary because of the violence that took place. It was scary, certainly, and most importantly, the people who were hurt or killed. But it was, the aftermath continues to be scary. Because if we get to a point in this country where we don't have the free transfer of power, where if I don't win election or you don't win election, violence is the answer, we will fail as a country, and we'll fail quickly. And so I think what I tell people is we have been so fortunate in this country for so long. I mean, compared to, I would say, any other country. Yeah. And with that good fortune, I think has come complacency, this belief that we are on autopilot and we will survive regardless. We won't be. We can't be on autopilot. It requires good women and men to step up and serve. And it requires those of us who are not in leadership positions to hold those people accountable and to speak up when we see things that break the foundations of our democracy, of our republic. And so I think that one way we can help is to show a method of agreeing and disagreeing that is civil, that is respectful of the institutions or branches of government, and we act as we would in any other aspect of our life. We don't get to take our ball and go home every time we disagree with our friend or a spouse or an associate. We recognize you're not going to get everything you want every time. You're going to be disappointed in elections, but your disappointment is not an entitlement to tear the whole thing down.
Yeah, people often talk about the Constitution, right? How important the Constitution is. But for 250 years, this has been an experiment. Part of it is certainly the Constitution, but it's the belief, win or lose elections, or wherever you are, that the system is more important than the outcome of an election or the outcome of a policy issue. Mm-hmm. I mean, it relies on, no matter how deeply disappointed we might become about one election, that we're going to preserve something bigger, the norms of it all. And that's more important than the individual victory. And I think that that's one where, we've been tested many times as a country, but we've always figured out the ways to come together. Like I even think of, I was living in DC on 9/11. Everyone came together. Mm. At times I worry, what are our 9/11s? January 6th, some could say, was a 9/11. Mm. We certainly didn't come together. If we're attacked as a nation, will we come together? Well, that we shouldn't have to have that, right? Mm. We should be able to remember that this experiment, what we've done, is so much the promise of it for what it gave our lives, and hopefully what it'll give our kids' lives. It's worth preserving. And then the patriots aren't the elected officials. The patriots are that rancher you were talking about earlier. The patriots have to continue to be everyone that says this experiment's so much more important than any given election.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I've told my friends, I said, whoever's in the White House, who's ever president, even if I disagree with every single policy position that they have, if they are making sure that we preserve these foundations of our country, I won't like it, but I'm okay, because there's another election coming up, and get out and campaign for the person you want. But if we shut those down or we burn those down, it doesn't matter what your policy positions are, because they're largely irrelevant because we've lost our country.
And one of the things that I got to both witness and learn from, too, was like my first 4 years. I came in, you were 2 years in. Right? My first 4 years was Democratic administration. And there were a lot of things that you disagreed with that, but you were so respectful. And you were respectful to every one of the cabinet secretaries and the president. And in a way that, at the end of the day, like from my view, yeah, it'd be easier to go out and torch him every day. But it also made those individuals that might have had different political philosophies than you say, yeah, I might not agree with Mead on everything, but I want to help him every time I can because of the way you approached it.
Yeah. What I would say to that is that when I approached our first campaign for governor, I said, I'm going to say what is on my mind and how I want to present myself, and I'll win or lose, and that's okay. But I don't want to do is say things I don't believe and then be stuck with those for 4 years, because that's, to me, would be like the ultimate misery. So I would give any friend of advice, listen, you got to be true to yourself. And the Republican Party or Democrat Party is going to push you this way or that way, but I still believe the vast majority of people in your state and my state are not way over here or way over here. I think they're here, and I think they're willing to listen to somebody who they may disagree with about some issues, but understands they're reasonable, they try to find results, and they're respectful of the process. Yeah. That would be the advice I would give.
Yeah, maybe the best political advice I ever got when I was thinking about running for governor, Tom Ridge, former Republican governor, Homeland Security guy, he said, you run to win, but you win to run. I mean, you run for office to win, but the only reason to win is to run government, to try to make it improve people's lives. So the advice that I'd give is, stay true to yourself. Like, these jobs are great, but it's not worth completely selling out to either a party or others to actually get it. And I still think that voters, more than voters, people believe in authenticity, right? That there's folks that voted for me that disagreed with a lot of things that I stood for, but it's like, he's a decent guy, he works hard, and he hopefully has my best interest in mind. So the advice that I'd give is be true to yourself. Find that as the North Star, and remember why you're doing it.
Right.
And why you're doing it is hopefully for the betterment of your state, your community, and our country.
Yeah.